So today we're doing section 6.8, which is factoring trinomials when there's a number in front of the squared term. So previously we used to look for two numbers that added to get the last piece, but multiplied to get the middle piece. Or excuse me, other way around. Added to get the middle piece, multiplied to get the last piece. We have to do a little bit more work. So when we have a number in front of your squared term, what we're going to do is multiply your first and last terms together. So 3x to the second times a negative 5. We're looking for two terms that multiply to get negative 15x to the second and add to get negative 2. So we just had to do one more step before, and obviously more after. So what are the factors of 15? Numbers that multiply to get 15. 1 and 15. 3 and 5. But it's a negative. Anytime your multiplication piece is a negative, that tells you one's negative, one's positive. They're going to be different signs. So we have these, and we have to do the flipped version of that. Now, which of these adds to get negative 2? Which pair of numbers adds to get negative 2? It's going to be a negative 5 and a positive 3. We're going to replace that negative 2x with a negative 5x and a positive 3x. So here we're copying down the original, but instead of the negative 2x, we're splitting that into 2 and replacing it with negative 5x and a positive 3x. So we found two numbers that multiply to get negative 15, add to get negative 2. Those numbers were negative 5 and 3. But because there's a number in front here, we need to replace the middle term with those two pieces we just found. Split it in half. Let's focus on just half of it at a time. Looking at the first half, 3x squared minus 5x. What do those two have in common? Yeah, they have an x in common. If I divide them by x, what do I get? Good. Now, if we just look at the second two pieces, do they have anything in common? No, so they only have a positive 1 in common. When we divide them by positive 1, what's left inside? 3x minus 5. What do you notice about these pieces right here? Yeah, they've got the same term. 3x minus 5 is what they have that's in common. And what's left over is x plus 1. This is how you factor when there's numbers in front of your x squared term. I know it's a lot of steps. So in general, to be able to factor these, when there's a number in front of x squared term, is not 1, oops, multiply your first and last terms together. That's our first step. Our second step is to find two numbers that multiply to get your answer from step 1 and that add to get your middle term. Then replace the middle term with answers from step 2. And then you can finish factoring. You don't have to. It's up to you. So let's try this process again. So don't focus on the words for now. We're going to try this process again. So looking at number 2, it's okay if you didn't get the whole thing yet. Let's just try to work through that same process. So our first step, because there's a number in front of x squared, we're going to multiply our first and last terms together. What is 2x to the second times negative 9? What? I don't know. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to get negative 18, x to the second. And that add to get 3x. It's a positive 3x. So let's list the factors of 18. 1 and 18. 2 and 9. 3 and 6. But because it's a negative, 1 has to be negative, which means we also need negative 18 and 1, negative 9 and 2, negative 6 and 3. Which pair adds to get 3? Six and negative 3. Good. So we're using that to replace that 3x. So you keep your first term and your last term. We now have a minus 3x and a positive 6x. That's what we got from those two pieces that we found. And we can split it in half. What do those first two terms have in common? Just an x. Good. What is left over when we divide them both by x? 2x and a minus 3. Good. Now what about these other two on the right? What do they have in common? 3. they have a positive 3 in common. When we divide by a positive 3, we're left with 2x, oops, wrong color, 2x minus 3. And if we do it correctly, every single time, those parentheses should be the same. So we have 2x minus 3 and x plus 3. The more we do this process, the easier it will become. Let's try again. For number 3, starting the same way we did before. Because there's a number in front of x squared, we have to multiply our first and last term together. We're looking for two things that multiply to get 12x to the second and add to get negative 8x. Okay? The fact that this is positive means they have to be the same sign. But the only way we can add to get a negative is if they are both negative. So factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, but as we said, they are both negative. Which one is it? They add to get negative 8? So, keep the first term, keep the last term, but we're replacing this with the 2 we just found. Minus 2x minus 6x. Because that middle term had an x, that's why those both have x's. And then split it down the middle. What do those first two pieces have in common? Just an x. When we divide by x, what are we left with? 3x and a minus 2. What do these second two have in common? Two. But because this is negative, we're going to take out a negative 2. And you'll see why in a second. When we divide them both by negative 2, what do we get? (3x minus 2). That's how we get the same thing in both. So what is the same on both sides? The 3x minus 2. And the pieces that were in front are x minus 2. What questions do you have? It's a lot of steps. I understand that. Let's try number 5. Because there's a number in front, we're going to have to multiply the first and last terms. But the very first thing I want you to look at is if they have anything in common for all 3. For all 3 of those, 3 goes into them all. So if we take out a 3, again, it's what's in common, we're left with 3x to the second.
Did you just skip 4?
I did. Oh, that's supposed to be an x, not a k. Plus 22x plus 7. Yeah, just because of time. And then I can treat what's inside here just like we did the others. Multiplying your first and last term together, we're finding something that multiplies to get 21x to the second and adds to get 22x. What are the factors of 21? 1 and 21, or 3 and 7. Which pair adds to get 22? One and 21 is the only option for that. So when we do this, this 3 is still going to stay outside. And I'm going to put a big set of parentheses. And then I'm going to treat this just like we did the others. So 3x to the second, that positive 7, and what goes in between is a positive 1x and a positive 21x. And split that down the middle. Just focusing on this stuff inside the parentheses. That 3 is going to stay out in front again. So, what do these first 2 pieces have in common? Again, what do these first 2 pieces have in common? Just a 1x. When we divide them both by 1x, what's left over? 3x plus 1. What do these second pieces have in common? A positive 7 goes into both. And when we divide them both by a positive 7, we're also left with 3x plus 1. So our final answer still has that 3 in front. We have the same piece, which is 3x plus 1. And then our 1x plus 7. That is our final answer. Questions? We're going to continue practicing with this tomorrow.